Welcome to No Borders with Brian and Carrie. In this week's episode, what we want to discuss with you is the intimidations that you might experience while traveling, especially as a first-time traveler outside of your country. There are a lot of different things that people have concerns of how they're going to tackle them.
Yeah, well, it's scary out there. The unknown is what's scary.
That's the scary part, yeah.
It's the unknown that will get you every time. And we're going to discuss those unknowns, what we experienced as we got out there for the first time, not just on our full-time travel experiences that we're going through in the last 2.5 years, but when we went on vacation prior to this, what we experienced, and what we do now to avoid those things.
Yeah, the good news is that 2.5 years in, we have plenty of moments now where we just had one the other day where we kind of pat ourselves on the back because it's like, wow, imagine 2.5 years ago, we wouldn't have even gone into that situation. Or we would have, and we would have walked out of that same market empty-handed because we wouldn't have known what to do.
We just didn't know any better. And you know, for those of you that have traveled extensively overseas, you might think, well, yeah, just go for it, just do it. But for those of us that hadn't or haven't, it's a real thing. It is easy to get intimidated. It is easy to be unsure of yourself. And we're here to help you think about those situations and work through them.
Yeah. So the first area that you are going to tackle right out the gate and probably be a little bit concerned about is the language barrier. Now, I know when we were first getting ready to go, we were actually using Babbel. We were using that language app, which was actually a lot of fun to learn on. We did it for about 3 or 4 months. We felt like we had actually learned quite a bit of language. And it was one that we would actually really highly recommend if you are looking to learn a language. It was super interactive, fun to do, and took a few minutes per day.
Right.
We'll have that link down below if you are interested in it. But anyways, so we get to our first stop, which is Valencia, Spain. Now, we had been learning our Spanish. Quickly out the gate, we realized they don't speak the same Spanish that we had been learning, which was not really necessarily our mistake. They just speak their own dialect.
They speak their own dialect. And, you know, part of the problem might have also been I wasn't pronouncing things maybe as fluently as maybe I needed to. But we quickly got intimidated at the markets trying to figure out what to buy, how much things cost. Now, Spain is on the euro, so that's pretty close to the US dollar, so that was simple. There have been other situations where it hasn't been that simple, but our first time out, it was all about the language barrier. It
was the language barrier, and that started pretty much right out the gate because we got off of the airplane. We take a train to Madrid, and at this point, we had been up for a good over 24 hours, and I want coffee. So I walked to a little stand while we're waiting for our next train to come, and I asked for coffee. My mistake, I didn't say cafe, and they looked at me a little dumbfounded, like, really? Like what? I don't understand you. Now, in my defense, if I was in the States and somebody came up and said, could I have a cafe? I would know what they're saying to me. So I pretty much can guarantee you they knew what I was saying. But when we go down to the whole thing of intimidation, that really took my intimidation factor up because it's like, oh my God, you know, I mean, this right out the gate, I'm like, I can't even go get a coffee.
Right. She bullied you. You were bullied.
I was bullied. I did get my coffee, but it kind of gave us right out the gate kind of this feeling of, oh crap, what are we in for?
What would you do now?
Now it wouldn't even faze me. I'd be like, cafe, you know, or whatever, but it wouldn't even faze me. So those are those little moments that when I look back now, we almost chuckle because the way we would handle it now and the way it would make us feel is nothing.
Right.
We would just, it doesn't even, we just don't even bat an eye at it, where before it was like, oh God, I have to go order something.
Yeah, we've learned that even though there's a language barrier, there's also hand gestures, a smile, point, you know, how much, everybody understands how much. And we have found that people are very willing to help. Sure, you're gonna run into a few rude people that maybe just tired of tourists in general. It's nothing personal towards you. They're just overwhelmed at the moment. that could very well be like the baker lady when we were trying to get our baguette.
That was our other experience.
Yeah, she was the soup Nazi. If you've ever watched Seinfeld, which I'm sure you have, she was the bread Nazi. And I'll tell you what, we didn't want to go into that bakery, but it was so convenient. It was right by our Airbnb.
Well, and
I would send Carrie in. I go, you go in.
we would trade off whose day it was to have to go in, because if you haven't been to Spain, one of the things now, at the time we were like, oh, I just wish I could just grab bread at the grocery store because it'd be so much easier. But they have a bakery pretty much on every block because you buy your bread fresh every day. And that was wonderful, but we dreaded going to get our bread every day. And so now, once again, we would just walk in and very comfortably be able to say baguette and point at what we wanted and be, in a way, I guess, a little forceful.
A little forceful, sure.
Not be so, I don't know, so shy about it,
Yeah.
And not in a mean way. I'm not saying that, but you know, we were so timid. Would be the word.
We were intimidated.
Yeah, we were timid of the whole situation and not understanding what to say. And come on, in Spain they have like 20 different baguettes up on the wall. Where we're from, we have one baguette.
It's called a baguette.
Yeah, you might have a sourdough baguette and a plain baguette. Those are your two choices. Yeah, but. Yeah. You go to Spain, you're going to have a lot of choices, and let me tell you, they want you. And you're not going to be able to pronounce the names of them. I don't care what language app you use. You're not going to know the name of them all. Right. So, yeah. So that would be probably the biggest intimidation right out the gate for us, was dealing with the markets and dealing with the language barrier.
Right. You know, and you know, there are also cultural differences that we had to get used to right away. The biggest one for us, I think, was simply going out to lunch and finding that most restaurants had been closed or were closing in the middle of the day. They eat dinner in Spain about 9 o'clock at night, and that's something that we never got used to.
We never got used to it in the 3 months. We even tried. We're like, we've got to embrace this and take on this whole eating at 9 o'clock thing, and that just did not happen. Yeah. We were watching out our window people eat dinner with their young children, which we didn't quite understand. To each their own. We're not judging. Everybody's culture is different. But I was like, what time do these kids go to school in the morning? Because it wasn't a weekend. Right. It was just a weekday, and it would be like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they were still at the restaurant. So that was such a weird change for us, because we, to this day, and by the way, we never embraced it. We tried. But we wanted our dinner at 5:30, 6 o'clock. We're getting older. We like our dinner early.
Right. So the market was intimidating. The cultural differences were a bit intimidating because we couldn't eat at 9 o'clock at night. So what do? We go to the grocery store, and everything is in Spanish, of course. You have to read the labels. You've got to figure out what you're going to do. Now, a lot of times, you know, noodles are noodles. You can look at the package. You can look at tomato sauce. But there are a lot of things that we had to figure out as we went.
Right.
And, you know, you can use Google Translate on your phone, which is very helpful. But we started doing a lot of that, but that kind of took us out of kind of the purpose we're there.
Right.
We want to eat the local food. We want to go to the market. We want to do these things. So we have to get over our intimidation. You know, and eventually we did, but it didn't happen right away.
No, and walking into those grocery stores, because I know we had some questions from people like certain aspects of these. You know, you walk into a grocery store where you are from, and they are going to have the check stands. They are going to have the self-check. They actually have that as well, just like we have told everybody. It's like, every place around the world is the same as where you're from.
It really is.
They're just, you know, speak a different language. So we walk into the grocery store and we decide to go to the self-check, because then you don't have to talk to anybody. But the problem with that is we didn't understand how to use the self-check because it's in a different language. So thank goodness in that moment we did have one lady that worked there that was very kind, spoke no English at all, but she was able to show us how to put the screen onto English.
Right.
And then kind of walked us through, because anybody who's done self-check, there's always little hiccups and problems with it. And she walked us through those.
Right. You know, to our defense, you know, since then, it didn't have the little British flag in the corner for English.
Yeah, we know where that's at.
It didn't have that. Yeah. So for those of you that think, oh, there's a little British flag up there, you just hit that for English. It didn't have that.
No.
I don't like using self-check anyway.
I love it.
My weight's always off.
I get to live my life
error. Or they want to see my ID because I'm buying beers or something. Something's always a hassle. So I always go through the check line. Now, this time, again, I was intimidated, so I thought I would just go through the self-check. Super nice lady. She walked us right through it.
She did. Now, one of the things about grocery stores, then, this has been every single place we have traveled to, in whatever language they are speaking, they're going to ask you a question when you first get up to the register, and we have learned the question is the same thing every single time. Would you like a bag?
Right.
So you can just pretty much guarantee they're not asking you, have you had a great day? They're not asking any of that. They're asking, do you want a bag? We always carry with us a bag. So I actually try and avoid that question. I get my bag out before I get to the stand so that they see it in my hand. And then they just don't even ask.
They might also ask a second question, which is also no. Do you have a rewards card?
Right. Yep.
Say no. Smile, because they'll usually pull one of theirs out, so you'll get the discounts.
Yeah.
Which is key.
We have managed just fine at the grocery store.
Yeah.
They're going to ask you questions in another language. You're not going to know the answer. They're going to see that you don't know the answer, and you're going to find your way through it. It's fine. You use they might be asking you if you are going to be paying cash or a credit card. Once again, we pay with card, or if you're paying with cash, just have that money out or the card out so they visually can see it, so you're already answering the question ahead of time. So there are kind of ways to get around it.
Right. Okay, navigating transportation, trains, buses, there's Uber just about everywhere, or Grab, or whatever it may be. Are those things intimidating? I would say yes.
They are. I'm not a fan of taxis, period, because when I don't speak the language, I'm one of those, I immediately always feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And one area where it's just commonly done is the taxi drivers. So that's one thing that we try to do, if we can, is we try and use the Uber app. In places, even when there aren't Ubers, they have the taxis are on the Uber app. So at least you know what you're paying. You don't have to sit and negotiate price. You don't have to try and figure out and show them where you're going. You've already set that location on your map. So by using that, it has eliminated for us some of that feeling of intimidation, because we know we already have the price set. We already know that they know where we're going.
We've actually been in situations where we have pulled up the cost on the Uber app, knowing there's not an Uber in our immediate area, but there's a lot of taxi cabs. We ask the cab driver how much, and they tell us a price higher than the Uber, and we simply show that to him, and he says, okay, I take you. For that amount. That
was really common in Vietnam.
Yes.
They did that. We would just be able to show them what we were going to pay, and then they did it for that price.
They just did it for that price. Yeah. That just takes anything out of the equation that you might get.
I just don't like sitting in that taxi while I watch their little meter going, or they don't have a meter, and it's just like this mystery price when you arrive, and then you wonder all those corners and turns that they're taking, if you really needed to take them or not. So that I would say transportation, and then also getting on buses. When you don't speak the language, or you show up, so some of the bus garages that or the bus stations we've gone to, and a good example would be Tirana, probably the most disorganized bus location that we went to.
Most intimidating.
But I do remember when we arrived to this, it's not even a bus station. It is a gravel parking lot with buses just all over the place. They're not even buses, they're more minivans. You have no clue where to go, and you feel immediately when we got out of our taxi intimidated. And we didn't even barely get out of our taxi, and the guy comes walking over to us, which immediately you feel like, oh, he's trying to scam us. There's something going on.
The guy was just some guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't in a uniform or an outfit or anything like that. He was just.
So we had no idea, because he's like, where are you going? We're like, oh, well, in any other situation like that, it's usually a driver who's like, oh, I'll take you. And so we told him where we're going. He goes, oh, okay, come here. And he processed our ticket for us for the bus. And then he walked us over to our bus. It was the most disorganized but organized bus area that we've ever been to. They knew what they were doing. Yeah.
We didn't know what we were doing. So they got us to the right.
It was organized chaos.
Right. But it turns out we were intimidated walking in, but we had no reason to be intimidated. No. It was actually very easy. The thing that intimidates me the most, I think even to this day, is the train situation. What car are we on? I remember one of the first trains we took.
This was just on a trip.
This was on a. This was when we first started, I think, wasn't it?
No, it was Portugal. It was our first trip in Portugal when we just traveled to Portugal because we got on the train. Remember?
I'm talking about the silent box. The silent
this
train.
one was when we were traveling. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We'll go back to the other story in a minute.
We got on the train and we got our seats and everything was grand. And I like to talk. I'm a good talker. That's one of the best things I do is talk. As I'm talking, this kind old lady comes up to me rather rudely, and she puts her finger up to her mouth and she says, "Shh." and I was taken back.
Yeah.
I was a bit intimidated by this old lady.
Yeah.
And I look over and there's a kid probably in his 30s, looks over at me and smiles and quietly says, "You're on the silent cart."
Yes, we were on the silent car.
We bought tickets for the quiet car.
Which we didn't pick them. They just put us on that one.
Right.
But it was so funny because we had to be quiet during that time. And at the time that felt so odd to us, right? Especially to this one here because you do like to talk. And when it was done, though, it was like, okay, that wasn't bad. And then on future rides where they talk a lot in certain countries, a lot and very loud, and they're on their phones and they're really loud. There were so many different times that we were on trains.
We wish we were on that silent cart.
Like, is there a silent train option? That would be, or a silent cart. That would be nice. So then the other experience that we had with trains. So I think trains are one of those areas that we probably are never going to fully figure out because they are all over the board, and it's not one of those things that you can totally figure out because if the trains aren't on time or they don't put up the right information or it's not even available for you to find, how are you supposed to know?
Right.
So this is one of those kind of gray areas where everybody is going to run into some hiccups.
I know what story you're going to tell. It just occurred to me.
Yeah. So we go and we are just on our trip in Portugal and we get on a train. Now the train was in the right spot. It was the right time. But it didn't say yet the location it was going to because it doesn't say the next stop or it doesn't say your stop. It says the final destination. So you never really for sure know. And so we get onto it, and at this point it doesn't even say the final destination. It is what we know going the totally other direction.
Right.
And quite a ways away.
Right.
And so we're questioning and questioning. We get on the train because somebody had told us it's the right train. We get onto the train. We're sitting there. And we both are looking at each other like, what do you want to do? Because it still is saying the wrong direction.
No, you said, is this the right train? And I said, I have no idea. And so we both jumped up and got off the train.
So we're like, what do you want to do? And it's like, we should get off the train. So we get off the train, and as the doors close and it takes off, the little reader board changes to our destination.
Yeah, that was the right train.
So it was the right train.
So we missed the train.
In hindsight, I don't know if we would really do that any differently. I think we probably would still do it the same way.
Probably. We got on the wrong train in Italy for a short. It cost us maybe a half an hour of our time. No big deal. We've been on trains before where we were right. A family got on. They started packing their luggage up. They got all sat down. And then they realized they were on the wrong train, and the train was about ready to leave. So they had to get all their luggage and jump off the train. I think the number one thing you want to do is just ask the employees on the platform.
The conductor.
Just the conductors or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Just ask them. They'll point you in the right direction.
Right.
We were in Romania, and we had no idea where we were going, how to pronounce where we were going. I simply showed the ticket to the gentleman on the platform. We're on the wrong platform. We're on the wrong platform by like 3 different platforms.
Well, and these ones aren't just a crossover. You actually have to go down below and then
go
over.
And so we pop up on the other side, and he tells us to keep going, and we keep going. Now he's like 50 yards away, and he's still yelling in Romanian, keep going, and he was smiling the whole time.
Yeah.
And we got there.
I think the whole point of the transportation story for us and what we've taken away from it at this point is just relax about it, honestly. If you get to the point where you get so nervous, worst case scenario, you miss your train, Worst case scenario, you're delayed by a little bit, but you're going to get on another train. You're going to get onto another bus. Not saying that's the ideal situation, but what we have learned is the day will go on. It's going to work out okay. So the more stressed out we've gotten about transportation and where we're supposed to be and all that can really ruin a day.
Okay, now on to the next topic. And this is something that we get asked quite a bit on our YouTube channel. Is it safe?
Right.
Have you ever felt unsafe?
I have not felt unsafe. The only time, honestly, that we've had any situation, and that was really just for me because it was a first, and it was a big issue, was that a war had broke out not far away. It's a war that is still continuing on. And we were in an area where there were a lot of protests, and it was kind of a really big protests, and Americans weren't really welcome. And so at that moment, I felt uncomfortable. But in hindsight, I think we were completely fine. We would have been just completely fine, but that was a first for us.
Right.
But other than that,
I think, again, that was that unknown thing, what could happen.
Right, yeah. Well, and I think that that's always the case. You want to still veer on the side of being cautious.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So I think on safety, I mean, we get is it safe for solo travelers? Is it safe for women? Is it safe just in general? And honestly, we've been to 20 countries now, and there's never been a situation where I felt like we shouldn't be here.
No, and that is, we do get a lot of questions, especially from female solo travelers asking me, have I felt safe? Would I feel safe traveling in an area by myself? There has not been one location that we have traveled to yet that I would not, like, excluding that situation, because that's a rarity. I would totally return to any of the countries that we have been to by myself and feel comfortable traveling them safely.
Right.
The one suggestion I always make to people is, the one area where if it's not in place really well, that you could feel unsafe is if the infrastructure is not in place. So if the buses are hard to find, they're not real good, there's not a train system, there's not Uber that you can grab, things like that. Those kinds of things, I feel like that's when I feel maybe a little more isolated.
Right.
So Albania was that location where it was hard to get around. But other than that, I mean, Spain was super easy to get around. I've never felt like you'd be unsafe. Nowhere in Southeast Asia did I feel uncomfortable or unsafe.
No, I think that, again, when you've never traveled, you've never been out of the United States, or you've only been to Mexico or Canada or wherever, it's the unknown.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you that I guess going someplace like, I don't know, someplace in Africa might be something that would intimidate me even to this day. But even then, I have learned that, people are the same just about anywhere you go.
Yeah, one of the things that we have very much learned is that people are not the politics. And so even though you're reading a lot of things in the news about a certain location, that is the government. That isn't necessarily the people. And so we've walked into places kind of with that idea, thinking we might not be welcomed because their government may not really be fond of Americans.
Right.
We've had moments where we're like, we're just going to say we're Canadian because everybody loves Canadians.
Everybody loves Canadians, yes.
But we have honestly just found that the people have been so incredibly welcoming. There has never been a situation where we didn't feel welcomed by the people. Some areas are more friendly than others, but that's part of a cultural thing, not so much or just directed towards us. So I think that, there's certain things you can do to feel more comfortable before you're going into a place. You can do a lot of research. You can see if there's any specific warnings in place, of don't travel to a specific area of that country.
Right. Or even a specific area of a city. Research where the best neighborhood is to stay, say in Bangkok. We stayed in the RE district, very comfortable. It's a beautiful little area. We loved it. And there's a place like that in every city around the world.
Right.
Just use your common sense is my best advice.
Yeah, and then another thing that you can do that we do is that when you're going into a new country, especially if it's a country that you feel, and it's not even if it's a country that you feel at risk, it's just a smart thing to do, is through the U.S. government, there's a program called the STEP program, I believe is what it's called. And you just register on there from the time you're going to be entering the country and the time that you're exiting the country. And then they know your contact information. They have an emergency contact in the event. So, you know, take war out of the situation or anything of that down those lines. But say there was an earthquake or something like that, and you have family that are trying to figure out where you're at or whatever, at least somebody knows like your actual whereabouts.
Where you're at.
Yeah, so I would recommend doing that. The other nice thing about that program is that we did have that when we were, say, in Turkey, when the war had broken out in Israel, and we were getting notifications on our phone immediately when there was any concerns.
Right.
And so it kind of can set your mind at ease because you're not always questioning like what's going on. They're going to let you know of anything major.
Yeah. And you know, that brings us up to the next point of healthcare, you know, in any given country. Kind of along the same lines is know your healthcare, know where the emergency room's at. Know that emergency phone number.
Right.
Now, we don't always do that. We used to. We've kind of gotten away from it.
The emergency phone number we don't necessarily do, which is our bad. I do always look up a local clinic and hospital to know the whereabouts of that. So in the situation that we do need to be able to do that. I think with the local like actual emergency number, I just feel like, you know, without speaking the language and calling those, So I think it's sometimes almost just more important to know where your consulate is located, have that information be registered with your government. So in the case of an emergency situation,
right, and you know this is all about intimidation and how you feel when you travel. If you have these things in place, it's just less intimidating.
I always feel like if I have at least because I'm feeling like if I have a medical facility looked up or a dental facility looked up, and that way if something bad happens, say I fall, I break something, I can say to Brian, get my phone, I have it stored in there, this is where you need to take me.
Right.
And so I've got that information. You're not trying to do it in the heat of a moment where you're hurting and you're trying to find some place to go. So I do like having those places kind of nailed in.
Yeah, so make sure you do that. Make sure you know the currency beforehand.
Yeah, that's another important one.
When you go somewhere, it's easy to figure out. You go to Turkey, we know how much the Turkish lira is to the US dollar. We obviously know how much a euro is to the US dollar. You know, make sure you know those things beforehand. And even then, it might be a little bit complicated, but I'll tell you, we were at the farmer's market here in Fethiye, or in Turkey, where we're at now, and we're not going to be intimidated. We're done with that. We're going to buy some eggs. We're going to get some
all kinds of
good stuff. Fruit, vegetables. I feel healthy today. And we know about how much it's worth.
So one little tip that I would give people, because I know that's a confusing part for people. So first off, you can always use a currency converter app. But the other thing that I always do before we get to a location, I just say to Brian, okay, so for instance, in Turkey right now, the US, so 10 lira is equal to 31 cents US. And so when we walk into, say, a grocery store, it's very easy to look at a price of something. So 10 is 31 cents, and so 100 is going to be $3.10, right? So you can always kind of, with those two very easy numbers in your head, 10 and 100, it's very simple to kind of do that math. Euro, we just don't even do the calculations on because we're talking, it's not that far different. So we just kind of figure it's going to cost a little bit more than what it is, you know?
Right. Well, the nice thing about, you know, back to the market that we were at, there is still that language barrier. So when they tell you how much, everybody understands how much. And you pull your money out, they tell you, but you can't understand them. So what I always do, what I've been doing, is I'll grab a larger bill than I think that it's going to be. And I just hand that to them, hoping they give me change. I can tell you right now, they always give me more change than I think they're going to give me.
In this situation, in Turkey, I mean, that was such a great experience at their market because everybody was so helpful and not a teeny bit of English spoken. There was none.
Nope.
But we went to, oh my gosh, probably 8 to 10 different booths and bought stuff. And our experience was the same for every single location, where it was how much, and they said the amount, which we had no idea what they were saying. And we handed them some money. And there was one time we handed him not enough, and then he told us how much. And they were so great, though, because I think with the strawberries and with the mushrooms, there was an amount, and they would they told us the amount, but then they'd add a couple to it to bring it up to the right amount you're paying. It was like they were going with kind of a flat number. They'd
add a couple mushrooms and a couple
strawberries
to get an even balanced number.
Yeah.
Now, rewind to where we were in Spain when we started out, we wouldn't have done any of that. We would have been too intimidated to do any of that.
Yeah.
And what we should have done is just ask the question.
Ask the question, or, the thing is if it's that challenging, because I think in those situations, so going back to the market in Spain or other markets that we've gone to, the question for us is like, okay, well, it's a kilogram. Every place is a kilogram. They don't deal in pounds. I don't want a kilogram. It's like 2.2 pounds of something. Right. So when you're buying olives, what amount do you tell them that you want? Olives is probably an easy one, but when we get into some spices and stuff like that, how do I tell them? Well, what we have learned is you can use hand gestures, like I want this little bit, make a sign of like a little bit, or get out your Google Translate, type in what exactly you want to say, and show them your phone. So there are so many ways around it, but just jump in there and start doing it, and you're going to be so happy that you did.
Don't be intimidated.
Don't be intimidated. It's not really that hard.
Now, there's only been one time I can think of where I was intimidated to eat the food.
Yeah, and I know what time that was.
that was in Bangkok, and they were serving up grubs and scorpions and all kinds of bugs. And I thought about doing it. I thought about this would be great on a YouTube video. And then I chickened out.
See,
Carrie didn't even think about it.
I wouldn't call that intimidated. I would just be grossed out. Like that doesn't even, I wasn't intimidated. I just wasn't going to do it. I have no desire to eat a grub or a bug. But now intimidation, what I thought you were going to say, right out the gate, street food was a bit intimidating for us when you see all of this food being cooked right there in these little carts. Let's face it, the cleanliness factor is out the window in comparison to what we are used to. And so that to me was very intimidating, but something we knew right out the gate we wanted to tackle because we were going to be there for 6 months.
We're going to be there for a while. And when you say cleanliness compared to what we're used to, what we're used to seeing when we go to any given restaurant. We don't always see the back kitchen in our favorite restaurant.
Sometimes that's a good thing.
So we don't know how clean it is. What I liked about it and why I wasn't intimidated was the simple fact that I'm seeing all the ingredients in front of me. I'm watching them cook everything right in front of me. And for me, it wasn't intimidating at all.
Yeah.
For me, I loved it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, I think one way that we avoided, or I avoided some of that intimidation factor was by, there's plenty of food carts. Like I said, they're just stacked one after the other, which was so awesome. But if you we made sure that we were going to those food carts that were getting a lot of customers. They were busy. Because now there were some that we did walk by that we were like, we're not eating
food's
at
been
that
sitting
one.
there all
It's
day.
been sitting all day long, and they just had those little fan things going above them so flies didn't land on it.
Don't go to those.
As long as you were careful. Unfortunately, we've heard stories from people that have gotten sick. We did get our shots before going. We don't know if that helped us, but we did. We were there for 6 months. We were not that careful. We ate all the time at food carts, and neither one of us got sick. So, and then I think that the intimidation other people have said to us about we go back to Southeast Asia again. I think that one just raises a lot of flags for people. The heat factor of how hot their food is, and I'll agree, the food is hot, but I love hot food. I love spicy food. Spicy food. Yeah.
That's another thing. A lot of these places ask you how much spice. Little bit of spice or lots of spice.
Yeah.
If you say lots of spice, you're going to get lots of spice. But that's something that I really don't think you necessarily have to worry about. Now, there's other food allergies you may have to worry about. Peanut allergies might be a thing in Southeast Asia that you might want to be aware of.
Peanut and seafood allergies, I think, would be tough ones to manage. And I think the spice thing, you can get around it. There were a lot of dishes, though, that you didn't have an option.
Yeah.
My favorite dish, which I can't remember what it was called now, I can't remember. Anyway, we had that numerous times. It was more popular in northern Thailand. And that one, we just kept eating it, even though your eyes are watering, you're sweating.
Tasted so good.
But it was so good. It sounds so good right now. But yeah, so there is... there can be some level of intimidation with dealing with the food. We've had people asking us about, going to other countries and say they're gluten intolerant, or like you said, with allergies, or say you're vegan, or whatever your concern is. I get it. There is that concern. But I think across the board, we have found that you can find all of those. Gluten-free, we have been surprised how much gluten-free we have seen. Not saying it's like on every street corner, but we have seen it accessible.
We have found it just about every place we've gone. We also found, besides the food in Southeast Asia itself wasn't intimidating at all.
No.
Either. Again, the transportation systems are all in place. They're easy to navigate.
And boy, we expected it. We were like mentally prepared. We had held off on going to Southeast Asia for a year.
Right.
Even though we both really wanted to go, but we were so intimidated to go, just expecting. Everybody tells you like the mopeds and it's gonna be loud,
busy,
and it's gonna
crazy,
be so busy.
All the horns are honking. Okay.
Yeah, we went to Bangkok, and if you watched one of our videos on YouTube about some of our favorite places, Bangkok is way up there, which surprises us even.
And so is Chiang Mai.
Right, both Thailand, yeah.
So there you go. Don't be intimidated by Southeast Asia like we were. As soon as we landed, we knew we were okay.
Yeah. Now, another area where people are somewhat concerned is the loneliness factor and just being homesick and kind of just feeling like, how am I going to navigate that?
Yeah, social media is a wonderful thing. I enjoy it thoroughly.
Yeah.
Texting is always available, Zoom, or any
kind of video chat.
Video chat on your Insta.
Yeah.
Kids are using
the kids
Insta,
are calling it.
But there are ways to really keep in contact.
There are.
Now there are times like right now we're 11 hours ahead of our U.S. Friends and family for the most part. So that makes it a little bit complicated. But it's their morning, it's your evening.
Yeah.
You can navigate that as well.
Well, and I think other people have had the comment of, I have grandkids, and and they're like, well, how are you able to be away from your kids and your grandkids? And that, that really is a concern. And we've navigated that to where we've now adjusted our schedule. We're now going to be going home 3 times a year instead of 2 times. We're going to stay shorter period of time each time we're home, but we're going to go home every 3 months, which will seem to me like I'm not leaving for so long each time. And so those goodbyes are a little bit easier. You don't feel so far removed. And I think the good thing to just remind yourself is your schedule is your schedule. So it's completely adjustable.
Right.
If you're finding it's not working, then adjust it. I think that people get too set on the idea that they have to lock in like specific dates. And we've kind of adjusted ours to where we go home during key holidays. We know we would like to be home at Christmas. We know we like to be home around. We love the summers in Bellingham, where we are from.
Right.
And then we also like to be home.
Well, we like to be home in the summer. We like to be home for Christmas, and then we're going to add a third one.
Yeah, so we're doing April. Yeah, so we're kind of around that time. So, just kind of pick those favorite key times that you want to be home for whatever event it is, a family thing, a holiday, or whatever it is. And so you don't feel like you're missing out on as much.
Yeah. Okay, now one thing that I've always gotten a bit intimidated over.
It's easy to do.
It's easy to do is the TSA agents, the Border Patrol, the Customs guys, they're always scary.
Yeah.
And, they kind of, they're trained to be a little bit aggressive, what I found anyway. That has subsided substantially.
Yeah.
I don't worry about it anymore. I know how to put my luggage on the cart. I know how to pull my computer out. I know how to do everything now. But I think back to when I first started, my heart would start racing a little bit.
You're
I'd be
just
like,
waiting.
okay,
It's like
you know,
interrogation.
yeah,
You're waiting for it.
You're worried about it. I use my TSA pre-approved liquid bag. It's easy to pull out. I throw it down. Never had a problem with that. But that is something that can be intimidating.
It can be. I think that one thing that has changed for me is that we've become so much more relaxed in the process. There used to be not only just the intimidation of them questioning you, you know, especially for us, because when we are coming back, I mean, there's times we've been gone 7 months. Like, where have you been? It's like, okay, well, let me start the list, and you start listing it off, and then they really start looking at your passport closer. They want to make sure what time you were in the Schengen, what time you were out of the Schengen. They're just doing all of this. Then they start asking us more questions. So there can be a level of that, but we would also be worried that we were going to possibly miss a plane connection or something like that. That area for us, we've just become a little more chill about. We realize worst case scenario, once again, just like your transportation, your train, whatever, you miss it, you're going to figure it out. So there's nothing you can do to rush the process. You're going to have to wait in that line. You're going to have to go through it. So we just have kind of, I guess, just learned to be relaxed about it.
We've learned to be relaxed about it. We've also taken a few precautions. We make sure if we do have a layover or connecting flight, we have sometimes 2-3 hours. Sometimes, you know, Carrie gets really crazy and does like a 6-hour layover.
It's not by choice.
Just to make sure that we get through customs. But there was a time, leaving the United States, we flew from Seattle to Atlanta, and we had about 45 minutes to get our connector. Now, there's no customs to go through or anything like that, which was fortunate for us because we got to our gate. We thought we had about 15 minutes to spare.
We hustled to our gate,
We hustled. We ran to our gate, got there, found the gate, and there was a bathroom right outside of our gate, and we both had to go to the bathroom.
Right.
So we turned around, and I hear a lady go, "Hey, you going to Dublin?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, where are you going? Everybody's on the plane."
Yeah, so
we weren't on the plane, so I don't know.
There was a good 20-some minutes before we were supposed to be leaving, and I know when we got there, we thought, well, maybe they're just running behind, like, because nobody was in line yet. They weren't boarding. It didn't look like.
They were
so
ahead
like,
of schedule.
Cool. We found it. We need to go to the bathroom.
Right.
So yeah, when she said that, it was like, what the heck? So we get onto the plane and everybody's already on board, which has never happened before.
Everybody's looking at us.
Yeah.
It's like, ah.
So it ended up working fine. But another thing that you want to make sure and do that will help kind of ease all of those concerns when you are going to be going through
The anxiety.
Yeah, that anxiety when you're going through is make sure and do all of your research ahead of time as far as what is required of you for your passport. When you have all of that stuff already lined up, then any questions they ask you, you're going to have the answers for. So one of the sites that we use is the Sherpa site. Once again, we'll have any of those links down below for you if you do want to take a look at them. But you can check for your passport what country you were flying into, and it's going to let you know, do you need a visa? How long is your visa good for? What other documentation? We started using it during COVID, and it was absolutely necessary at that time because we needed to know. But now we use it just to know what visa is required. Do you need to show any? Because we get a lot of questions from people about a exit ticket. You know, are you going to need an exit ticket? Things like that. So just go on there. You're going to have all your answers.
You know, and make sure you do it. Because we stood in line in Vietnam. We were in line for about 45 minutes to an hour just to get through customs, just to get to the custom agent to stamp our passport to let us through. And there was people in front of us that did not have a visa. You have to get it when you get there. You know, you can't get it on arrival.
You are not supposed to get on arrival.
You're not supposed to. They'll let you do it if you forget. But they stood in line for 45 minutes to an hour, found out that they needed a visa. They had to walk back through everybody, go to a visa
wherever
stand,
they've got
they
it.
go, get a new visa, get a visa, and get back in line. So make sure you have that taken care of before you.
Well, and also some of those, I mean, the Vietnam being a good example of that, is that it wasn't a visa that you just could go online and boom. Some of them, like Turkey, we had it like immediately. But in Vietnam, it took, I believe it was 72 hours before we got the visa emailed to us. So some of these you do have to prep and plan a little bit for. So you don't want to save these things for last minute, or that it's going to definitely make you a little more uncomfortable. One of the areas for us that has probably caused I wouldn't say arguments, but it's probably been one of those areas that pushed a little bit of buttons for both of us, mainly because you're usually tired, you're hungry, it's hot, all those things, is navigating and getting directions. And, there's often time we say you do have SIM card in your phone and you should have data, but you're out of connection area or whatever. Or one thing we've experienced is like Google Maps will direct me wrong on my phone.
Right.
And so we will walk, not a long ways, but we'll be walking a direction. I'm like, now it's totally navigated me a different direction. So, I would say that getting directions places, getting lost, that is an area that can be a little intimidating when you're trying to navigate yourself around a foreign country.
Yes. Now, my navigational system on my phone works. So I don't know why we don't just use mine.
I don't know either.
And not hers. But we will walk a couple blocks out of the way. Now, that's not a big deal. We did that just the other day, as a matter of fact. And it's kind of fun because Carrie and I have never walked from point A to point B in a straight line.
Yeah, it's actually become quite a joke.
It's
we
we'll
never
zigzag.
Ever get there the fast, easy way.
Right,
Yeah.
We'll zigzag, but Google Maps is your friend.
It is your friend, and the thing is that you can download the location that you're going to. So say you're not going to have coverage at all.
Right.
You can download that map for that area. So even if you are out of coverage, you have that map, and we have utilized that as well. And like I said, mine will navigate me a little bit off sometimes, but at least I still have the map and we have the general gist of where we're at.
Just where we're at, yeah.
I think that it's that feeling that you can't just walk into, say, a store and say, hey, I'm looking for this place. Can you tell me which way to go?
Right.
So there can be that feeling at times because, we had the situation in Portugal where we were looking for our Airbnb. Once again, we were just on a vacation. And we could not find the Airbnb. We spent an hour and a half walking through the streets. We both had connection on our phone.
Yeah.
It didn't matter.
We did the same thing in Saranda.
Yeah, we had the address, but the address was not directing us to the location we were supposed to be. And after an hour and a half of searching and me pulling it up on Airbnb to see the railing of the balcony, what it looked like, we were able to find the place. So yeah, I would say that can be an area when you are in a new location, and you're like, oh, we want to go to wherever. It can be a little intimidating to try and navigate yourself there, knowing that there's nobody you can go ask for directions.
Right, and I use Carrie a lot of the time. I follow her wherever she's going. Now, I did a lot of that in Florence because I got turned around. We'd step outside of our Airbnb, and I got turned around every time, I think. And we were there for a month.
Well,
I just could not figure it out. Now, she did the same thing in Sevilla, Spain. So she was following me. Every time we left our Airbnb, she would take a right.
Yeah.
Where are you going? So there is that. You do kind of get turned around. You're in a new location.
We move enough. Yeah, and you just, for some reason, sometimes it just never clicks the direction you're supposed to go. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes right out the gate we've figured it out and we're so proud of ourselves. But yeah, other times it can be a struggle to the very end.
I think we're getting better.
Yeah.
I think we're getting better. So I really feel like, to sum all this up, it's not intimidating, and it certainly doesn't have to be intimidating.
No.
It's just the fear of the unknown that makes it a little bit scary.
Right. Well, and I think that fear of unknown is, we all paint this picture of the most worst situation possible, and nobody's going to help us. And I don't know. I know that's how we were. We had no clue what to expect. And what we have found is, you're going to figure it out. You're going to find yourself your way around. You're going to learn how to navigate those markets. It's going to be easy to go into that restaurant and get a table. It's not hard to do. You just point to people. You use your hands. They really work with you. It is not going to be hard and a challenge, and you're going to figure it out.
People are friendly all over the world.
Yeah. So to wrap this all up, one of the best things that you can do to eliminate as much of that intimidation factor as possible is do as much research as possible ahead of time. Make sure that you have your accommodations organized, you have screenshotted the address just in case you don't have service. Make sure you figured out the currency before you get off that airplane or out of that taxi cab. Just have as much ahead of time organized, because that is going to make your trip so much better. Okay, so if you want to find us anywhere else, you can find us on all the social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and obviously on YouTube, and you can find us there at Brian and Carrie. You can also find us on our website, which is brianandcarrietravels.com, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Cheers.
Cheers.